There's a chance some of you have never heard the Greek myth of Ariadne. Here it is. King Stephen Minos Lewis, pastor of Knowlton Presbyterian Church in the mighty and beautiful kingdom of New Jersey, America, had a daughter. Ariadne Faye Lewis began as an idea that turned into a headache in the head of her mother, Queen Amy. This headache was removed by a Presbyterian surgical procedure called a psalmectomy, which involves singing an imprecatory psalm 7 millimeters away from the pain center. The psalm was sung, and at its conclusion, Ariadne leapt from her mother's forehead fully grown and fully armed and with a wonderful singing voice. One day, when Ariadne turned 18, King Louis decided to send her to Geneva College, which is a liberal arts labyrinth in Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania. Geneva was designed by the legendary artisan minister John Black Johnston of the RPCNAL, the Reformed Presbyterian Church of North American Labyrinths. The great maze maker designed the Geneva Labyrinth to be escapable, but only after 4 years of wandering aimlessly through identity crises. The Geneva Labyrinth was chiefly built for human beings at the worst stage of their development, the repellent years of 18 to 21, when the human brain is fully grown, big enough to think of itself as grown up, but so empty of experience that it contains the wisdom, compassion, and empathy of a potted plant. But Geneva was created as a home for creatures called pedagogues, too. Beasts portrayed in classical times as having bodies of vast knowledge and gigantic heads full of bull. King Louis was certain Ariadne would be able to escape the great Geneva maze because of her powers of song. To train his daughter for college, he often led her blindfolded deep into the vast New Jersey wilderness and abandoned her there. She was not permitted to remove the blindfold. She had to find her way home in the dark. Through the woods she walked, stumbling over the corpses of other Reformed Presbyterian pastors' children better off dead if they can't hack it. And every time, Ariadne made it home. How? By song. In other words, echolocation. She sang, "Ah." The trees echoed her location back to her all the way home. Ariadne has, by song, echolocated her way through 4 years of Geneva twists and turns, dodging and enduring many hazards. Hostile chapel audiences, close quarters road trips, close quarters dorm situations. Enforced physical education, the great Satan poli-sci, sidewalk encounters with athletes. Dostoevsky, the brothers Karama, someone muzzle those brothers, please. Science requirements, the survival politics of Alex's general population aggression, the seasonal affective disorder weather of Beaver Falls, sunny only 5 days a year, paid for by 360 days of sadness. While all this time is directed daily by overpowering bells operated by tyrannical librarians who above all else desire power. Ariadne Faye Lewis has almost escaped the Geneva Labyrinth, but her greatest challenge is still ahead. 2 things remain that she must do. Thing 1. Technically, Ariadne isn't in a labyrinth. She's in 2 labyrinths. You see, there are some professors with bodies of knowledge so vast and heads so gigantic that Geneva must create labyrinths within the labyrinth to contain them. Dr. Joel Ward is housed in a special labyrinth called his house. This semester, Ariadne has been sent to the Ward family by her father, King Louis, as a final test. If she can survive the Wards, she can survive anything. And she will be worthy of New Jersey. But the fight is difficult. The 4 Ward children love their Geneva pet. They follow it, adore it, wake it up early in the morning, ask it a billion questions, and daily they beg their parents, please, can we keep it? What happens in the mind of a Geneva student when they're worshipped? Some go the way of the devil and attempt to dethrone God. I've seen it. Will Ariadne be able to echolocate her way out of the woods of idolatry, haunted by the 4 little red-head spirits of the woods, spirits who daily sing her praises? Time will tell. And Ariadne's second task? Thing 2, bring the house down. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Ariadne Lewis.
Well, I must say, that is the best introduction I've ever received. Principally because it's the only introduction I've ever received. So, I wanted to begin today with a poem that I wrote when I was about 11 years old. So, this is to illustrate the effects of why you should never get into a fight with a poet, especially a young poet, because they might put you into a bad poem. So just don't do it. Don't get into a fight with a writer. This is based on true events, and I don't know who the person was that I was interacting with in this poem. I don't know what their name was, so it might be one of you. I apologize. If you recognize yourself, we can fight about it later. It's an ode in free verse form entitled To a Munchkin. I was 11. Do you remember me? I remember you. You were standing in the sunlight when I saw you, sunbeams slanting and glinting off your silky hair. You had a big stick in your hand, and you were breaking off the tree's bark. I yelled, "It's not your tree! Stop hurting it!" And you said, "Says who?" You were very rude, Munchkin. Don't deny it. I yelled right back, because I was angry now. I say! And you returned, "It's a free country, isn't it? I can do whatever I want." And I said, "Says who?" I figured I would throw your phrase right back at you. And you turned away and muttered, "Munchkin." It was very demeaning. So I said, "Munchkin yourself." Or wait, I didn't know munchkins came in that size. Boy, you got mad then. You didn't stop breaking off the tree until you had to leave. And later that year, the tree died. Okay, so it was going to die anyway, and it wasn't your fault. But I liked the peaches it bore, or maybe they were plums. I forget, but they were good. They chopped the tree down and put a house in the empty lot and put a portable outhouse where the tree had been. And that wasn't fair at all. Which is why I am writing you this poem. Munchkin. These next two were written a little more recently, but you can still laugh at them. That is also acceptable. They are both written on a similar theme. I'll begin with the short story, and then there's a poem at the end. I'd like to apologize to Dr. Shirley Kilpatrick beforehand for my pronunciation of the hero's name in this story, but I grew up saying it this way, and that is not an excuse, that is just an explanation. It is entitled, The Bride of Sir Gawain. The just whitening cattails rustled in the wind. Gawain lay on the ground, his fingers twisted through the long grasses, seeking something to grasp hold of, as the air grew cooler around him. Grief traced down his cheeks. When at last he pushed himself off the ground, frost had touched the corners of his cloak. Stars grew in the sky. He stared at the crest of the hill before him, knowing that no one was there, but hoping, nonetheless, to see them returning, the fair lady and Percival, his friend. That is, once upon a time they had been friends. Once upon a time, Gawain and Percival had ridden together, eaten together, jested together. But then Percival's lady gifted him immortality to match her own, and he had abandoned the world of men forever. The couple's pale, strange faces had turned away from Gawain and to each other, and the two had ridden back to Faery, where the sun shone everlastingly. Gawain had fallen to the ground when they bid him farewell. Bitter sorrow hung heavily on him. The light never looked the same after that. Every day, sorrow breathed its gray vapors into it, and all the world turned pale. It remained so even 3 years later, when the hag rode into Arthur's court, seated on a very unhappy mule. She rode up the highway, through the palace gates, and into the great hall itself, gusts of winter's breath behind her. Visitors often rode into the hall, questing ladies, victorious jousters, and even the Green Knight, that giant who had bested Gawain in a duel of honor. At the end of that tournament, the knight had bound a green scarf around Gawain's waist, a reminder of past shame and that his life was not his own. Gawain wore the scarf still. So visitors often rode into the great hall, but very few made the king turn pale, as this woman did. She did not dismount or make any pretense at courtesy or homage. Instead, she called out, her voice cracking with age and coarseness, "I have come to claim my share of our bargain, O king. Do you remember this bargain, or are you too much of a coward?" Gawain rose carefully, his eyes on the king. "I'll suffer no one, not even a woman, to call the king a coward." But Arthur gestured for him to be still. "I remember this bargain quite well. What do you choose as payment?" Gawain did not sit down, but, obedient to his king, he did not move. The hag smiled, showing one of her missing teeth, the chill wind blowing through the open door behind her. "The hand of one of your knights in marriage." Gawain's eyes caught the sudden movement of the queen clasping Lancelot's hand, her rings digging into his skin, and he wondered at it. But Arthur did not move a finger. "Whom would you have?" His knights shifted their feet uneasily. "Sir Gawain, unless he is too much of a coward." Arthur turned to him. "Would you serve me in this way, Gawain?" The hag leered from atop her mule. All this time, Gawain had not let go of his sword hilt. Now he hesitated but a moment before kneeling at his sovereign's feet. The words were a whisper, between the two of them alone. "My king, I gave you my oath of fealty. I owe you my life and the life of my family. You know I would do anything for you." He rose and gave his hand to the lady, looking into her eyes gravely. "Would you do me the honor, my lady, of becoming my wife?" The green scarf felt tight around his stomach, and her knobbly fingers reached out to pinch his cheek. "Of course, you fool! Didn't I just ask for you?" Her rags flapped in the wind. The wedding was brief and the celebrants few. The king was there, splendid in his wedding clothes and terrible in his grimness. A few friends were there also, but many knights were absent, most prominently Lancelot. As the newly married couple walked to Gawain's apartments, the hag leaned on him, pressing her bony fingers into his arm and whispering wetly in his ear, "Your friends seemed none so keen on this wedding, my love. Why ever did they not come to see what a lovely bride I make?" Gawain smiled sadly. He knew that some of the ladies had attempted to help her dress that morning, but it seemed she had rejected their assistance, or that she gloried in her squalor. The very whiteness of her bridal gown made the dirt beneath her fingernails and the rheum dripping from her eyes more dreadful, the delicate lace emphasizing her tangled mass of hair and blackened teeth. Her wrinkled lips, puckered beneath his earlobe as if for a kiss, and he hastily pulled out a chair for her beside the fire, which could not cut the damp chill of the apartment. "Here, my lady, you must be weary after such a long day." She wriggled into the chair, eyeing him, her lips curling into grotesque faces. A vision spread out before him, the hag sitting beside him at feast after feast, evening after evening, attacking him with her kisses as he went out into the battle, leaning heavily, she would think seductively, upon his arm when things were most precious and beautiful. And suddenly he found himself running from the room, flushed and panting. Out in the hallway, he set his forehead against a cold stone wall and stared, unseeing, through an arched window at the night. Ice slicked the ground outside. The moon seemed ready to detach itself from the sky and hurtle down to the earth in its nearness. Behind him loomed the doorway in the sitting room, where rest and the fire and his wife awaited him. "No, for shame, Gawain, for shame." The scarf dug into his ribs. "She is my wife. She has no beauty, but that is no great matter. She is older than I, but again, that is not a great matter. She seems to have no soul, and that is a great matter. Indeed, but I do not have the wisdom to judge such a thing. Instead, I am bound to her by a covenant far greater than myself. What honor I possess belongs to her, and what graciousness I have in me I will give to her, though I die in the attempt." He went back to the room. A little screen hid the woman from view at first, but the firelight danced warmly on the walls. A strange fragrance filled the air, like the earth after a deep rain or the green growing things of spring. He sat down before the fire and turned to the lady to mention the cold weather or to ask about her journey or her mule. But all such thoughts fled from his mind. Beside him sat no hag, but a young woman, as beautiful as the first rushings of the brook in spring, as spotless as the distant hills of Avalon. She saw his face and laughed. "Where is she? Where is my wife?" he gasped. "Before you. But you are not the woman I married this morning. You are fair and young and graceful, and she—" He stopped, ashamed. "She was ugly and old and terrible, yes, but that was I. Long have I waited for this day, Sir Gawain, ever since I first saw you weeping against the hill before the land of Faery. I wept too, and from that day I have looked for you. Many tales I heard of your nobility and courtesy, your chivalry and courage, but I did not know if the tales were true, or if they were only true for the young, the beautiful, and the rich, not the poor, the orphan, the widow, and the dreadful old woman who merited no courtesy. That is why I came as I did." He did not know how much time passed while he sat listening to her. The fire was dead, but he was not chilled. "I fear you have revealed my hypocrisy then, and are sorely disappointed." Far from it. Outside, the first robin caroled. He could almost hear the buds on the trees opening as she spoke again, softer this time. Far from it. But a doubt, cold as winter's last touch, stroked his heart. There is no way this can be. No mortal man ever married those of fairy blood. Sir Percival, he for whom I grieved that day on the hill, was transformed into one of the fairy kind by his lady, that they might dwell together always in her land. If somehow you and I are truly married, as you seem to be trying to assure me, then—" He gazed at his hand, looking for the flawless pallor of the fairy kind, but the battle scars and the crooked nails remained. He felt his face. It was not fixed in that perpetual smile Percival had had that last hour on the hill. The green scarf hugged his ribs still, and the lady, nay, his wife, laughed. But it was the laughter that is mixed with tears. Yes, there is such a law, and no mortal has ever dwelt long in fairy, and none of the fairy kind ever dwelt long on man's green earth. He turned his head away from the fire, that he might not see her, yet her words did not stop. "But I shall not leave you. I have renounced my people. I am no longer of fairy. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Nothing but death shall separate you and me, a death that shall come to us both. And the robin outside had been joined by 1,000 other birds, for it seemed as if spring had come early that year, and the lilac scent filled the room, and they were together. And then this is the poem that accompanies it. Beyond the Mists. When Camelot has crumbled like a loaf, its crumbs drop down between the blades of grass, a picnic now forgot. When death fills every corner like a web, each glittering heartbeat, every golden soul made dusty white as unswept stairs. Let hearts not troubled be. Glad crumbs may lose their way or be forgot. Glad times be broken, murdered, laid aside. But apple-scented hands will place these stones again, and laughter soar above the waters, out of mists, and all that once was best in Camelot will live again. Indeed, it only sleeps.